Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Joe Naz podcast. Today, we have one of my least favorite friends, my ugliest friends, and shortest friends on the podcast with me, Mr. Jared Frazier. And I'm stoked to have you here, bud. I know for a while we've both been on a journey around the world, but you've been doing it for work and for many other reasons. And I'm stoked to have you here to kind of catch up and also just pick your brain and just chat about life. So thanks for coming in today.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Honestly, I've been looking forward to hanging out with you since I got back from Germany. We've kind of made some efforts to do that, but this is two birds with one stone here. We're able to talk through some things, hang out, and looking forward to it.
Yeah, man. I mean, actually, it's weird how the universe works, because we definitely tried to get together a bunch of times, but I think this is the best way to catch up with somebody. I mean, I can tell you right now, working on these podcasts and doing these podcasts, there's no greater way to learn about another individual and also just to learn about that person than this, right? We got several cameras on us, we got lights on us, there's no distractions. I mean, obviously I have my phone just for the purposes of reading a couple notes, but really this is just an opportunity to catch up and see how you're doing. So I'm stoked to have you here. Thanks for coming in, my dude.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, dude. Cool. So for those of you that don't know Jared, just to give you a little bit of background, Jared is was a clinical psychologist. He is now a federal psychologist, and he works for the VA, which stands for Veteran Affairs. He essentially was a psychologist within the military, in the Army specifically, and what he does for a living. The reason I want to bring that up is just because so you can understand, I think, a little bit about how his brain works and how he's able to analyze things. But today we're not going to be just talking about him and his job. We're going to be talking about just different stuff throughout our lives, kind of talking about our journeys in the last couple of years, because I think we both have been going through a little bit of a journey of self-discovery, figuring out who we are, and that's more what I'm interested in. But I also do want to pick your brain about what it's like to be in the military, because for me, as an individual, right, I hear military, and look, I have huge respect for patriots, and I really appreciate everything that everyone does in the military. But for me, I don't know how well I would do in the military. I don't like to be told what to do. I have problems with authority, and obviously that would not go well being in the military. So I guess just knowing you as an individual too, because I consider you one of the most free thinking individuals I know. Why did you decide to go down the military route when you could have done it privately and you could have done things so differently?
Yeah, it's a good question. Most of my family thought it was a huge mistake, and they thought it would be great for me, but also thought that I would have a very difficult time with it.
Yeah.
I joined as an officer. So you mentioned I'm now a federal psychologist. I'm still a clinical psychologist, but federal just meaning I've been with the federal government since I joined the Army in 2017. But I joined during my clinical doctoral program to finish my internship and postdoc. So I came in as a captain, a little bit different than enlisting as a private, or maybe even after having a bachelor's degree, enlisting as a specialist.
Got it. And so these are just different rankings, essentially, when you're starting the military.
Right. And it really matters in what your military life is like, right? As an officer, as a captain, you're expected to learn what's needed to be able to command a company, which is 600 people.
Oh, wow.
Right. So you're coming in as expected to have some knowledge and expected to be able to be a leader. Whereas when you're enlisted, you're expected to know a job well, and if you don't, they're going to train you to do a job well. You're not expected to make decisions really on the fly. You're expected to follow orders. And if I would have enlisted, I think I would have had a very difficult time with that, because I don't. I tend to resist orders, because I challenge a lot of what people are thinking, and that's, I think, why I'm in my profession. I think challenging other people's thoughts and ideas is not only interesting to me, but I think it's part of what gets us stuck is people's ideas and thoughts. And I find myself more capable on the other side, which is, are you sure? Instead of, yes, sir. Or yes, ma'am. Yeah.
I mean, it's interesting too when you see some people, let's say a security guard or someone doing a basic low-level job. And I don't mean to say low-level in the sense of degrading your job in any way. Your job is very important, but you're given a task, and a lot of people just do that task without thinking about why they're doing that task, right? And a lot of times, I think it's important to take yourself out of a position and be understanding why you're doing something, and not just doing it for the sake of doing it. But of course, that's the difference between someone who's doing their job and someone who's a leader and can help direct people to do their jobs.
Absolutely.
And I guess I wanted to ask you a question. So were you able to start off as a captain versus other people that just have to enlist?
Right. Yeah. So, and I don't think I fully answered your past question too, so I'll try to wrap them in here.
Yeah. Well, you
Is
were kind of answering it because you
Yeah.
did. I mean, you were basically saying you came in as an officer,
Right.
which is a big difference than coming in as a listed.
Totally.
So I
Yeah.
guess it does make a big difference in the sense of you probably had a lot more leeway and you had a lot more decision making and a lot more freedom than coming in as I don't know if the term grunt or just someone who comes as a private and they're just like, do this. You have a job. You have to do this. You don't have any other choices.
So I came in as a captain because I was almost done with my doctoral program, my education. So they try to match. Okay, I went to 4 years of bachelor's degree plus 5 years of doctoral program. So that kind of equates what someone might do if they were officer, starting as second lieutenant to first lieutenant to captain. So they, we're same age, just gone different routes in learning our trade, right? But there was a difficult decision to join, as I was sort of alluding to, that a lot of my family thought it might be difficult for me. I knew it would probably be difficult for me. At the tail end of my graduate program, before I went into internship with the Army, I just moved out here from San Francisco, and I was living a very free life. I was writing my dissertation, collecting graduate plus loans to afford my housing. Opened up a massage business for a while to help me pay rent. I don't think
you did that.
I didn't wear a shirt for maybe like 3 months or at one point, wearing flip flops and, and just board shorts, longboarding around, riding my bike every day. And so I was living this kind of very free life of just taking things as they came. I had such a flexible schedule, and part of me wanted to challenge this other part of me too, which was to get really organized and make my goals clear and to accomplish something. I mean, I was accomplishing something, but also want to get some things down on paper, right? And thinking about just career progression and, but why the Army, the military? I think that comes from maybe a more historical place, or I'm thinking like deeper place. My grandfather served in the Korean conflict, and I only knew him, of course, after this, right? But I always saw him as this sort of sturdy oak, very interesting guy. He passed when he was 70. So I also was maybe 16 when he passed. So I didn't really get the chance to know him as an adult. But the guy I knew was pretty hardened by war. He saw a lot of terrible things over there. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Korean conflict, but it was pretty ugly.
Yeah.
He was up at Chosin Reservoir. I'm talking just waves of, Chinese coming at people dug in foxholes, sub-zero temperatures. We're talking like negative 50 degrees. People just freezing overnight. And he was injured. Ended up being medically evacuated. But I thought, man, I don't know my grandfather. I think that was part of me coming to terms with. Let me just backtrack. I think a lot of psychologists, or maybe not psychologists, everyone, we kind of make our career progression in some way or another. If it's in line with our values and purpose, it's sort of trying to claim the things that we didn't have, or we're trying to solve a problem or figure something out, right? A lot of psychologists are trying to figure themselves out or figure out their families.
Yeah.
If you ask a lot of psychologists, it's why. It's not just it's altruistic, I want to help people, but also what got you on the path of asking these questions in the first place?
Yeah.
And thinking about what depression is like. A lot of people have experienced some level of emotional distress that prompted them to start thinking about solutions, right?
Yeah.
So I think that was a big thing for me, is wanting to get to know my grandfather better and understand him. And then also I had several friends in high school that went into the military when I went to college, and then got to see them. Some of them came back pretty messed up.
Yeah.
And it just felt like, man, this is in my life. It's around my life. I'm interested. So I started working at the VA in grad school in San Francisco. Worked in the opioid treatment program for a little bit, substance use, couples and family therapy. And so I had this background, this interest. And this kind of all culminated to, well, now I know what treating veterans is like. What about moving into, the 3 steps before, which is when people are actually in service. you see people messed up after the war. It's, why not help people during the war? So we're not having people show up 30, 40 years later still struggling with chronic PTSD, right? So I just had this thought of let's solve this problem. But of course, it's not that easy. It's not that simple, and I'm not a hero in that way. It just feels like that's how you might solve a problem in your head, right? Go to the source.
Got it.
So those are some of the things that drove me to do it. And of course, there's a lot of benefits, and it certainly helped me out.
I mean, I understand the logic. You're like, let's go to the actual problem instead of trying to like treat people after the trauma. Let's try to treat them during the trauma. I don't think there's a lot of situations, especially, I mean, when it comes to helping people with trauma specifically, where you can even know that the trauma is going to occur. But someone's in the military, they're going to a war zone, they're seeing death, they're going through the fight every single day, right? You can't time when someone's going to get molested or when somebody's going to be abused by their parents. But when it goes to the military, like, yeah, you can literally be there helping them treat on a regular basis. So I understand the logic that you were thinking, and you're like, I can make a difference. And so also too, you brought up a point where you were talking about like, I think a lot of psychologists, and I mean, just people that are trying to help others, yeah, they're all on their own journey of self-discovery too. And as you go further down the journey, I think naturally people want to come to you to get help, right? I know for myself, like ever since I went on that journey around the planet and people just saw me working on myself, I know people now just like call me randomly like, hey, I saw you did this. I know you were going through that. I'm going through the same thing. Do you mind holding some space or just talking to me about it? And so I think like everyone in life, the more that you become aware and like you come to the person that you're supposed to be as an individual, I think other people see that and they want to relate or they want to get help to get to that point too.
Yeah.
And you're doing it in a medical space. And I guess, do you find that like people are more scared to come to you because you are an actual doctor, or do you see people opening up more and wanting your help because they do know that you have the degree?
Yeah, it's. I don't think I've been in that position yet where, you know, I'm working in a clinic, and even in the Army, in a clinic, patients are assigned to me.
Yeah.
So there's not a whole lot of people seeking me out.
Yeah.
Right. Not yet. And I'm still in my early career. I've been licensed for 3.5 years now, 4 years.
Yeah, I guess the question might have not been framed. Maybe, do you ever have like friends just reaching out to you regularly, looking for advice?
Yeah, I think that's also part of what drove me into this field too. Is, you know, I sort of served as that person as in my own self-discovery during college and figuring things out.
Yeah.
It was a big turning point, probably my sophomore year in college, where I switched from like the biology study into psychology and started thinking about, man, existential terror and stuff. Philosophy. Asking
big questions.
Yeah. And there were a lot of just conversations on the porch and friends that were going through some tough stuff. I was going through some tough stuff, and just ended up, in college, that's when I started working in grief groups too. And I was sort of identified in my friend group too as this person is going to be a psychologist and be helping people in that way. So I think since then I've tended to be, in conversation. And you know, there's somebody who, as we hang out in more social areas, conversations can go that way.
Yeah,
and it's
very
just
easily.
Yeah.
It's like people are like hungering for people to listen.
Yeah.
Or they just need someone to help and to kind of give them some guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I guess, did you ever do any active service when you were in the military? Like, were you going to any places where you actually had to use a weapon? Did you do any of that?
No, we were all trained in using weapons. I was never in a combat zone. I was in Germany for the last 3 years, just moved back in January. But and during my term there, went out to Kosovo for a few months. When we evacuated Afghanistan in August 21, I was an on-call psychologist for that whole Operation Allies Welcome and Refuge. So we had like 9,000 travelers, we call them, people that we evacuated from Kabul, that were on the tarmac at Ramstein Air Base. And a lot of them were, 4 days deep into their grand escape, with their lives threatened, their families' lives threatened. People showed up, went from their wedding to the airport to escape because they were going to be assassinated. So not combat, right? But some missions that seemed very dire, right? That there's a lot going on. It is an active mission. But other than that, more behavioral health style missions. So going out to Poland and just teaching mindfulness for a week and more social, psychosocial skills. And we thought of that more as a kind of skill building week for people out there that were stuck socially or geo-isolated from their family and friends for a year and a half, right? Stuck in this tiny little town in Poland. So, trying to get ahead of the problem again, right? Nip the bud.
Yeah. So I guess when working for the military, do you have like a lot of freedom to like make decisions or like kind of implement the tools that you want to implement, or is it very structured? Like you have to do things this way, you have to help people in this specific manner, or do they give you leeway to kind of help how you want to help?
Definitely give you leeway. Yeah. As a psychologist in the Army, you're looked to as the expert. There's no one telling you how to do things. It's generally written into an operational order, behavioral health, and then there's a sentence: we need 1 or 2 teams.
Yeah.
Right. That's a commander from doesn't really know how behavioral health works.
Yeah.
And what happens. Like, we just know that if someone's there and they talk to people, less people kill themselves.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how that frame of mind is happening sometimes. They don't know what it is. So we're determining the providers are determining, is this going to be individual therapy, or do we need to do a group, or maybe there's just a suicide in a unit.
Yeah.
Do we need to bring everyone together, including the commanders, or are we just going to meet with a few people? Are we going to do therapy or just evaluation and help people get out because maybe they no longer meet fitness standards, right?
Are you saying there's a lot of people that commit suicide while on active duty?
Yeah.
Is that like one of the bigger problems?
It's a big problem. I don't know
Gotcha.
if it's the biggest. I probably couldn't say that, but it's huge. It's a huge problem.
Yeah. What is like the biggest problem that you see for people that are in active military, like mental health wise?
Well, to again go back to the source, right? Why are people killing themselves? And I think last I looked, it was at a higher rate than the average, than the global population, right? There's more stressors, geo-isolation in your jobs. I mean, there's other jobs. Like imagine if you deep sea fish in Alaska or something and you're away from home for 4 months or something like that.
Yeah.
Army's a lot like that if you're stationed and you just have to uproot and move, and you can't always bring your family or your spouse or your children with you.
Yeah.
So a lot of people are isolated. And then imagine if being on some forward FOB or a forward operating base, or even just a small post where you don't have your things. You're sleeping in a cot in a tent with 100 other people.
Yeah.
Your life and autonomy is sort of stripped away. So there's a lot of stressors there, extra stressors. So I think if we look at what's the biggest problem, it's probably more about leadership, and that includes everyone on all levels, right?
Yeah.
Not just blaming some general somewhere, but that taking account of that and actively doing things to proactively to prepare for that, and also to cope with it more effectively. The Army is great at working huge long hours and then drinking.
Yeah.
It's almost like socially appropriate to just get belligerently drunk.
Yeah, almost to
a
escape
lot
your
of units,
problems
right.
and not think of things. I mean, when you are saying what you're saying, it also is like just giving me this wave of like appreciation for the military. Like I think obviously we all take it for granted, not understanding like not just like obviously people are putting themselves in the line of danger and fighting and risking their lives every single day, but like just not understanding the little things, like you're being taken away from your family, you don't have any of your luxuries, you're sleeping on a cot, you're going to a place where people might not speak English, and people are trying to kill you every single day, and there's all these little nuances. But even for someone like you, right? Like I think of you, and when I heard you were going to the military, I'm like, dude, like fucking, he's leaving all his friends, he's leaving all his family, he's gonna be out there, by himself, like, but he's doing it to help them and to help us. And it's just like this wave of appreciation that I obviously want to send out to the military, but just I think a lot of times people don't think about the little details and how all of those things can add up to putting you in a mental state which is not going to be beneficial for you. And I'm sure the work that you do is much appreciated within the military itself, and people really appreciate what you do for them.
I think it is appreciated, and sometimes I don't think it's understood. There's still the stigma out there, right? That if you go see behavioral health, that something's wrong with you, and then maybe your command or leadership thinks that, oh, we can't trust this person anymore because they're unstable. Can they point the gun in the right direction?
Yeah.
Are we going to lose this guy as soon as we go out on this mission because they're going to get medevaced, sent back because they're thinking about killing themselves? So there is this stigma that's just sort of built into the Army. When you're relying on one another,
Yeah.
and then someone peeps out, they're like, "Hey, I'm struggling." It's like, fix it
Yeah.
ASAP.
I mean, dude, when
we're relying on you.
When
know?
you were saying point the gun at the other way, are you saying like sometimes people go crazy and just shoot up their own like platoon? Have you heard of that before?
I mean, I haven't heard of that much.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm sure it's happened,
sure
right?
something like that has
and
happened.
also, if we don't even think about weapon, but there's sexual assault all the time.
Got
Rape,
it.
sexual assault is big in the military. That was one of the things I did the last year I was in the Army. I was a victim advocate for victims of sexual assault, and also people that had experienced sexual harassment, just to help them have a backboard to be able to talk things through and make decisions about how they're going to approach and help the situation. But it's a huge thing. So
Are you saying like sexual assault from somebody else also in the military, or just from their youth?
in the military, usually, it was responding to things that had just happened.
Wild.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, like any scenario, I'm sure that stuff happens in the military just as much as it happens in normal day life here back at home. And it's like back at home, my worst problems are, what am I going to do this week? What are my stresses with work? But I'm not sitting there risking my life every single day, worried about, a bullet taking me in the head. So yeah, it's very admirable. Let me ask you, when you were out in like Germany, and so like, actually two questions. One, did you have a choice when it came to like where you were going to be stationed at all? Or did they just say you're going here and you're going to do this? And then what were some of the struggles that you dealt with just having to be away from your friends and family and just being out there in Germany? And I remember you telling me you were living with like other families. You didn't even like have your own space and stuff. Is that true?
Oh, I had my own space.
Okay.
Yeah. On missions, I didn't. Like when I was in Kosovo, I was in a mud hut with another doctor. It was fun. He and I we were buddies by the end of it. But no, I had my own place off post. Fortunately, because not everyone got that.
Yeah.
Someone that came in right after me had to live on post.
What does on post mean?
On post just means on our post, right? You got to go through a gate, and you live in a barracks type building or a huge apartment building with government furniture and all that. If you want to leave, you got to go through a gate. You're just always seeing your coworkers, your soldiers. Good morning, sir. All that. So I like to get out of that. And so I'm really fortunate that I was able to live off post and have German neighbors. I got to learn a bit of German, got to drink, beer with these guys on their porch and cook over the open fire and make a lot of friends there that I miss, So I ended up making some good friends out there. But I got to choose somewhat, right? It's sort of like a ranking process, somewhat like our internship ranking was. It's where you rank from 1 to 30 or how many ever positions are available for that rotation. So the Army puts out this list of like, here's the open positions for a behavioral health officer or a psychologist, and then you rank them. I ranked Germany number 1. There was another, I think it was Germany, South Korea, and Hawaii. I thought, if I'm going to be in the Army and maybe for only 6 years, let me get out there and do something interesting and travel and get some unique experience. I didn't really want to be like Fort Sill, Oklahoma, or
Yeah, why not go to Germany?
like,
I mean, out of the options you said, I was like, I'd probably go to Germany too. It's like you get to get out of the country. It's probably safer than most of the other countries that you'd go to. Definitely sounds a lot safer than going to Kosovo. So it's like you're making like a wise decision on many accounts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was what I wanted, and learned a lot about what I didn't like. And that also helped me decide to get out, right? That career wasn't for me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, technically you're still working for the military though. Like why go back to working for the military when you could go create your own practice? Is it like easier? Do you just not want to put that effort into creating a business? Like what are the reasons why you didn't do it?
Yeah. So I'm no longer working for the military. That's DOD, Department of Defense, is a separate federal branch. I'm in the Department of Veteran Affairs. So I'm working for people that have served. It's I'm a civilian, I'm no longer Captain Frazier.
Okay.
Jared or Dr. Frazier, right?
Yeah.
I can quit my job anytime I want. Couldn't in the Army. I have a lot of lateral leeway movement that I can do within the VA, and that's why I wanted to join the VA, is to, one, keep with this. I have an expertise now. I have this military background. Worked at a VA before.
Yeah.
I think it's a good place for me. A good utilization of my knowledge and skill set right now. I'm figuring out if it's a long-term thing for me right now.
Yeah.
working in the public service is important for me right now, especially for student loans. There's something called the Public Service Student Loan Forgiveness Program, PSLF, something like that.
But essentially, if you
public
work,
service loan forgiveness. Yeah, so if I work in a public service for 10 years and make payments every month, at the end of those 10 years, the rest of my student loans are forgiven.
Wow.
We're talking, there's a lot of loans
I
involved
can
in my
imagine. Yeah,
education.
I get it. Yeah.
Plus the plus loans to live in San Francisco and in LA.
And
So I
they'll
racked
wipe
them
all
up.
that.
Yeah, and it'll wipe it all.
So I mean, are they
yeah.
including your service that you already did in the military?
Yeah.
So you really only have a couple years left.
Yeah, 4 years.
Rad.
And also I was doing a lot of different things in the Army, and now I'm a clinic workhorse, and that's what I wanted. I wanted to get back to the clinical work, see patients, do therapy, do
And
assessment.
you said workhorse just because they're going to give you all the patients. They're going to keep you working like
Yes,
regular.
yeah.
So
In the
you
Army,
like to be busy.
Right. In the Army, I was in the clinic 2 days a week. The
Yeah.
rest, I was doing more administrative stuff on TDYs, traveling. At one point, I was an officer in charge for when we had during the pandemic for the trace team. Right, so I was just in a call center with a bunch of soldiers.
What's trace?
Tracing COVID-19.
Okay.
So, okay, you
Oh,
have
interesting.
symptoms. Who were you around?
Yeah.
Those people need to quarantine, or So that's how the Army works, right?
Yeah.
And that was a big thing too. Is I don't want to get so far away from my formal education that I'm starting to let these things slip and forget about how to be a clinician. So this is exactly what I want, is to get back to seeing patients. My grid, my week schedule is seeing patients. That's all I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right. And as I get really comfortable with that, I want to start picking up different things, maybe head a committee, be a part of different committees, or take on a leadership position. And that'll help me decide if the VA is really a good option for me. I have a lot of other aspirations too, and I'm just sort of feeling it out,
Yeah.
one step at a time, and just keeping my options open. Still a free thinker, still curious about where the field is headed.
Yeah.
Really interested in a lot of the research, the newer research on psychedelic assisted psychotherapy. So curious where that's headed, and it would be great to be on the cutting edge of that, or on the forefront of it. And,
Yeah.
I'm just I think in a good position to be able to, especially in LA. There's some research with UCLA and the VA here. A lot of things are happening in San Francisco. The California Institute of Integral Studies is doing a few programs on training clinicians to be a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapist.
Have you done any work in that space yet, or are you still waiting?
I haven't. Yeah, I'm waiting for an opportunity. I was actually when I moved back here to LA. If I waited until July, I could have been on a clinician for a study treating MDMA for treating PTSD in veterans with MDMA assisted psychotherapy, but I didn't want to wait until July to get a job.
I understand. Yeah.
But that was an offer on the table, and I just thought, let's go security, a little bit longer term. That was only going to be a year-long study. Probably could have erupted into a lot of opportunities there, but I'm in touch with some of those people in that space, and just waiting for
when the opportunity arises. Yeah. Also, Matt's in that space. You should get his contact information.
Awesome.
There might be an opportunity in this room. It's
Cool.
always wild how things like
There
that
it
can
is.
happen. Yeah. But I mean, I'm interested too to hear about that stuff too. I've watched some podcasts where individuals will talk about how psychedelics can assist with that therapy. And I've had ceremonies where I've gone through psychedelics, and I've gotten a lot of revelations and be able to just realize a lot about myself too. And I mean, even let's say you take away the psychedelics for those types of experiences, right? I think anytime we take time away from technology, our phones, and just literally going into a space where we sit and allow things to come and process through, there's just so much that can be beneficial for that. And I mean, for myself alone, like when I went to India and I did a 10-day silent meditation retreat, like you could almost call that experience like psychedelic, in the sense that I was going down like rabbit holes that I didn't even know that I needed to process and that I needed to go through. And things were coming up from like childhood, stuff that I had like shut out because I literally had shut it away and not taken time to just go through it step by step. And so I'm really excited to see what's going to be coming with the development of psychedelic treatments, because I think they're all tools that can be used, right? And of course, anytime you're using a tool, or when it comes to a psychedelic or medicines, right, it's like, why are you using it? Are you using it to escape? Are you trying to disappear and not think about what's going on? Or are you using it to like elaborate, to enhance, to try to like figure out what's really down the root cause. And sometimes you need a little bit of assistance because as a human being, we shield ourselves or we hide and we push those memories away, and those tools can help us open the door and unlock the things we're really searching for to heal from.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, I'm excited. I definitely want to hear about some of the stuff you're going to be working on in the future. Yeah. And I guess, you obviously are dealing with like, okay, so when I went on my journey, figuring out what my traumas were and the things that I needed to work on, for me, it happened through going to men's groups and like really like seeing other men talk about what their traumas were and the things that they had suffered. And through watching other men be open and vulnerable about what they were suffering, I was able to learn what my trauma is. You are working in a very different space where you're dealing with people that know what their trauma is, in the sense of, they're going to a war zone. They're very emotionally distressed. They're dealing with death every moment. They're having all of these problems and anxieties. They're alone. They don't have their families. Like, what the issues are. And so it's very interesting, to like almost like want to like pick the brain of like a psychologist that might not know what the problem is with the person, but in your situation, you actually know what the issues are. Do you think that allows you to apply tools more appropriately, or do you think it would be more difficult if you were dealing with someone that they might not even know what their problems are? Did that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's different schools of thought about kind of self-disclosure and how much you involve yourself. In my office right now, I have some things up on that show that I was in the military, and I have around my badge, around my neck, it says Army veteran. So I think in some spaces it's helpful to know, like, oh, maybe this person understands my situation a little bit more.
Yeah.
I like to leave it at that. I don't like to talk about myself as much because it's a slippery slope into filling. I don't know. It takes away opportunities for someone to, we call it transference in psychotherapy, but a chance for them to project their own mind onto me to make sense out of me. And in that way, you see a lot of people's patterns of thought, like how they think about other people, how they relate with other people. So giving too much self-disclosure can sort of shut down some of those opportunities. But also, I can't hide who I am either, right? If someone sits in front of me and they make some assumptions based on just who I'm a man, right? Yeah. I have an athletic build and I'm a big guy, so maybe I've played sports. Maybe if I'm in the VA, I was probably in the military. It's kind of an assumption, right? I think it can be useful, and it could probably have the opposite effect too, right? That someone feels like, oh, this person won't be able to understand me. Yeah. Oh, they were in the military. He was an officer. Yeah. No, I don't talk to officers. Because in the military, officers were hard to talk to. Yeah. You don't go up to your company commander and say, I'm having a difficult time. They don't care. Yeah. That's maybe the way they think, right? Yeah. They're busy. They're just, oh, you're having a bad time, like you're out. So it's tough to find some emotional connection with an officer. So I think just
you might not be as much on the front lines, and in many senses. Yeah. Like when you're saying what you're saying too, like I know for like when I talk to Justin Green, right? Mm-hmm. Big Justin Green. Yep. So I know he's seen active combat, and so for me sometimes, like we'll just be shooting the shit, talking about our problems. I'll feel almost like embarrassed talking about my problems and the stresses that I'm going through, because I'm just like, this guy, he dealt with death and he dealt with war. And like, I know there's a lot that he doesn't even want to share, but it's like, the reason I'm bringing this up is because everybody has their stuff and it's important for you to share it. And like I've discussed on other podcasts, there's no ranking of what you're going through and what somebody else is going through. It's if this is affecting you and it's an emotional thing that you need to process and you need to divulge, it's important to not hold that in and just recognizes that every person's different. We're all having our own experience, but your stuff is just as severe as this other person's stuff, even though it definitely, I would rank it as more severe, but to you, it can be just as severe the way it feels to you.
Absolutely. I would argue that, right, nothing has intrinsic value. We give meaning to things and based on the context they're in. So maybe what's difficult for me is not difficult for you, and the opposite too. Yeah. Right. So it's easy to judge and compare ourselves against other people, but you're totally right. Right. We're our own people. We've moved through the world in different ways. Maybe I didn't learn a certain social skill that you have, and it makes walking into a public area very difficult for me, whereas it's easy for you.
Yeah.
But then maybe I can deal with seeing someone die, right, on an operating table. Maybe I'm a medical doctor and I see people die.
Yeah.
Right? You think that's the hardest thing in the world, and I'm like, nah.
Yeah.
The hardest thing in the world is like going to a subway station, right? So nothing has intrinsic value.
Yeah, I mean, we're all living our own subjective experiences, and it's important to to understand that everybody has their own experience, and even though you might be in the same room having the same conversation, this might be the best conversation of my life. This could be the worst conversation of your life, and it's just understanding that it's important to recognize that you should try and understand where other people are coming from.
Absolutely.
Yeah, cool, man. So when you're working with individuals that come into you, right, and obviously it's a wide range of different problems. You're dealing with suicide, you're dealing with people that might have been raped and all kinds of stuff. I guess, are there a specific set of tools that maybe you learned in school, or like maybe things that you've just learned through the process? Like let's use suicide. When somebody comes to you and they're suicidal, what is a tool that you will use to help this person work through that, or to feel like or to help them try to get over that suicide?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on a lot of different factors, right? Whenever I see someone, there's a full intake. We do a whole diagnostic assessment, background history to understand a little bit more about the development of a problem, right? Suicide isn't suicide. It's not like this thing in the medical sphere where, like, if you have a tumor, you have a tumor.
Yeah.
And there's a
go
way
in and
to
cut
go
it
fix
out.
it.
Yeah.
Suicide could be, you know, from this, maybe others have rejected and ostracized that person. You know, maybe they're dealing with trauma where they were raped and made to feel like they were meaningless and had no value to other people. And maybe someone else is having a difficult time living up to expectations. No one's ever explicitly told them that they're a piece of shit, but they think they are, right? I mean, so the interventions are going to totally vary. But if we were to just kind of generalize a little bit, right? I think I try not to insert my own value of life to a patient of mine. Say, like, please don't, or your life is important.
Yeah.
Because I want them to find out why they want to live. So it's generally more of an intervention like that. Is like, why do you wake up? Why are you here today? Yeah. Why aren't you dead?
Yeah.
And it's actually, I saw one of the questions you were threw on in an email to me or text. It was something actually when you were on your journey and we had a conversation. You were talking about starting up a podcast. Yeah. And I saw a question on there. I think I shared with you at one point. And I remember you saying, like, I want to use that or talk about it. And it's about, what would I want my tombstone to read? Yeah. Where do you see yourself? So these are cool questions.
Yeah, I definitely took that question from you.
Yeah. No, it's awesome because I think it's there's different ways, right? Different interventions. That's what I was saying. Generally, helping someone find their value, what gives their life a sense of purpose. Yeah. What makes their life worth living. Yeah. Right. And ultimately, what's so important that they're willing to face their deepest fears, and what's worth the pain to experience, right? Like being a father, maybe for someone is, and being a certain kind of father, is so important that they're willing to make amends with their ex, and just so like, there's certain things that are worth it. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so a lot of things come up when you're saying what you're saying, but like the biggest thing that's coming to my mind is like you almost use reverse psychology. I don't know, for lack of a better term, in the sense of instead of like telling people things and explaining things to people, you're allowing them to come to the conclusion by asking the questions that are necessary for them to get to that end point. And that's what I hear when you're saying that. Does that sound correct? Yeah, I don't use the term reverse psychology.
Is not the right term.
I would think of it more as eliciting.
Eliciting. Okay, eliciting. Yeah. I just use that term because it's, instead of me like trying to give them information, I'm trying to have them give it to me.
Yeah, and reverse psychology can be an eliciting, because you might say the opposite. Like if you know someone's feeling a little uncomfortable, maybe you were afraid of the pants you wore today. Yeah. And I'm like, those are the worst pants I've ever seen. Maybe you would be like, no, they're not.
Yeah, got it. Okay,
So I'm
when
eliciting that.
So you're right.
Yeah.
What I said is not reverse psychology, but you understood what I'm trying to say. And I guess for lack of not having a defining term, I agree with you in the sense that a lot of times in my life, like when you're a lawyer, you have a lot of people that come to you and they're like, they just tell you things how they believe it is, or they're a Google lawyer and they've gotten the answers. And so what I've learned is I have to be able to have them come to the conclusion without me telling them the conclusion. And so what does that discovery process look like? What question do I need to ask them to get to this point? What question do I need to ask them to get to this next point? And always people resonate when they're like, oh yeah, that's it. And it's not you telling them that's it. And even one of my friends, like, I remember I like to explain or sometimes over explain things. And she's like, well, don't explain things, just be the explanation or just live it, right? And a lot of times just by living and doing it in front of somebody else, they'll can see what's the correct way to do something without it being like forced upon them or telling them how to do it. And so, yeah, there was so much beauty in like a lot of the stuff that you explained, and also understanding, like you pointed out all the little nuances, like, right, like, are they insecure because of a parent, the way they treated them? Were they molested so they've lost their self-value, or are they just like scared of living because every single day is a torment? And so you used the word also when you started, which is it depends. And a lot of people ask me questions all the time, and that's the number one word. If a lawyer doesn't tell you it depends, he's probably not a great lawyer, and not to insult anyone, but it's just every single fact and every single detail really matters, and it depends. And if you can't understand that every single like thing that like every experience your entire life helps to build who you are. And so understanding that it's not just peeling back one layer, but sometimes it's one layer at a time, which will lead you to the things that you need to unravel next. So yeah, so it's cool to hear that you understand. Obviously you understand that, you're a psychologist, but a lot of people, I think, even in your field, maybe don't understand those little nuances and those details. And maybe they try to use cookie cutter ways with everybody, but I think those individuals too might just be disinterested in doing the job for the sake of doing a job. You've explained to us how you actually, like you said before, you want to help people, but not to use that nuanced term, but like you were like, I see a problem. What is the best way to help with this problem? And you're like, I need to go to where the problem is occurring. Instead of just dealing with the after effects of the problem, you're trying to make a difference when it makes, I think, the most impact. So that's also really cool to see that you were trying to do it in a way that most people probably are not thinking about that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, it feels like being seen a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Being appreciated for,
it's a compliment. I'm letting you know, like, good job. I mean, like, yeah, most people, I think a lot of times they're just trying to find a job, right? They're trying to do something for the sake of making a living because it's what they were pressured into and what they were. And I mean, a lot of times, like, I had a bad framing like most of my life because I felt like my parents forced me into becoming a lawyer, right? They're like, they just like implanted it in my brain, but like, the reframe is my parents guided me to being a lawyer. I'm actually pretty damn good at it. It's a pretty fucking sick job. I make good money and I literally help people every single day. But I like had resentment against it most of my life because I didn't come to the discovery of what I wanted to do on my own. It was imprinted on me as a child that you should go down this route, you should do this. But now I've been able to reframe it. But it took a lot of self-work and discovery to be like, oh, no, this was my choice. I actually wanted to do this. Like, it's actually good for me and I love what I do, but it took a long time to get to that conclusion, like probably within the last like year or two. And so, yeah, I mean, it's cool to see that you were able to guide yourself on this journey to going exactly where you want, and you're doing exactly what you want to do. And I just assumed that you being in the VA, this was like, you just saw this as like, the easier route and you're still working for the military. I didn't realize you still had so much freedom. And also you explaining to me that you were a captain and all this stuff. I'm like, I'm stoked because I was like, I knew you as a person. I'm like, I don't see him wanting to go down those roads because of, I know you wanting to have the freedom to do what you wanted to help people in the way that you want to help them. Yeah. So it's cool.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons you and I liked each other when we first met is that we're kind of seeing the world in a similar way, and we were probably both on a similar point in our journey, a relatable point. Yeah, there's a Venn diagram like me and Joe Naz were. Yeah, we're like sitting on the floor. We
hit each other in this point, and now we've gone all the way around. Now we're hitting each other at this point. So you guys are seeing us dressed pretty nicely.
We were on the floor though.
Yeah, like we met at. It's just so people understand. Like there's different drastics and dynamics, and I know if you follow me on social media, you understand that. But like we met at something called Splash House, which is essentially a 3-day party in Palm Springs, where it's a Vegas pool party type of style situation at multiple hotels where you're essentially just partying and hanging out for 3 days. And that's where we met. And I remember the first time we met, we just like ended up just sitting and talking like this for hours on end, discussing everything from like Android Jones to like different like psychedelic, different types of things. And like also just like discussing like life. And we spent so many hours just getting to know each other. And so we've gone full circle in many ways. And it's been a beautiful journey, and it's fun to see. Like, I mean, I think you and I have a lot of friends that are very professional. They get stuff done, but they also have fun and they have a good time, and it's good. And it's important to remember that, you know, the universe was created to enjoy. It's not about being serious every moment of every day. And I know you can relate because our jobs are similar in the sense that people just come to us with their problems all day, every fucking day. That is our job. Come puke your issues at me. Let me help you solve your problems. And so I think we've just, like when you brought up earlier that when you were younger, I was always just that person too. Friends would just call me, and just next thing I know, it's word vomit for like an hour all over me about what's going on in their lives, what their problems are. And so I think naturally, like luckily, like I said, we're doing things that I think we were called to do on this planet. And a lot of people, that's not how it is for them. And so we've been blessed in that sense. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember still like one of the first conversations we had where you were like explaining to me your dissertation, and it was a really cool conversation. I guess I just never really understood what like a dissertation was in the sense. So a dissertation, you tell me if I'm incorrect, right? It's like when you are going to get your doctoral, you typically have to do a dissertation, and dissertation is a project that you essentially have to create a unique idea that you need to present to be able to graduate as a for your doctorate degree. Is that correct?
Right. It's kind of a culmination of your education and the applied, you know, practicum experience where you're acting as a therapist to build this clinical knowledge to contribute something to the field of psychology.
Yeah.
So for me, it was, you know, writing a paper. And it's all writing a paper, but for me, it was just doing statistical analyses. I started another project too, which was actually leading a group and showing that this certain treatment was effective. Ended up, that was very difficult to do alone, and just wasn't in the space to complete it myself. And just switched modes when I was here, and thought more about a measure that would be useful and effective. So, you know, it turned into a completely different project, but it was new and contributed to the field, and that's for everyone. You could do a qualitative analysis, send out different surveys. You could do a new treatment, a novel treatment, and see what the impact is. Maybe do it on provide that treatment to a demographic that hasn't been researched yet. Yeah, it's just new research.
Gotcha. Have you seen the movie or the Netflix movie Stutz, the one with Joe Naz? Yeah, I really like that movie. I resonate a lot with it. I'm also in this program, Aubrey Marcus program called Fit for Service. There's this girl named Dr. Kelly Brogan in there. I don't know if you've ever seen her. She's also do you know her? She's a psychologist too. She's a genius. This lady is just amazing. But you know, I obviously have a little bit of interest in psychology and understanding trauma and all this stuff, and just like from an amateur perspective. But going down this road, like I really enjoy it, and what I wanted to ask you if you would agree in the sense, like when I watched like the Jonah Hill thing, and I heard Dr. Kelly Brogan saying a lot of the stuff when it comes to psychologists, they're trying to give a medicine to solve the problem. But what I've understood from watching these programs and seeing these speakers,
psychiatrists are providing medication.
Yeah, they're providing the medication. And essentially a lot of this is also just like a lifestyle change, right? And like sometimes it's just how do you live your life, and have you taken the time to process these things, and have you worked through these issues? And that a lot of times I think people get, you know, into these antipsychotics and these antidepressants and anything with the word anti, and they're almost like proponents of keeping people stuck in that cycle for the rest of their life, because it's telling them they have a problem, they need medication to continue to use it for the rest of their life to solve that problem. But when really it could be a lifestyle shift. Do you need to work out more? Do you need to eat healthier? Do you need to deal with the things that you're using to escape your reality? Or are you trying to just keep hiding it and pushing it down with the medications?
It's awesome to hear you explain that, because this is at the core of my model of therapy, acceptance commitment therapy. It's really built around this idea that there's pain and there's suffering. And suffering is what we experience when we avoid the pain, or that when we focus on the pain completely. We're spending all of our energy to not experience pain, to not experience right? There's this concept called a dead man's goal. It's sometimes I use that concept when helping patients with determining what goals they want. A dead man's goal is a goal that a dead man could accomplish. So, say you wanted to quit smoking. Okay. Well, if you died, you would quit smoking too. So there's no vitality in that goal, right?
Yeah.
It's anti something, is generally not providing you with this vitality, this life energy to move forward to something. So ACT is about accepting that whatever it is as it is, whatever that pain is. I mean, it's not about smoking. It's about the thing that you want to move toward. And if I move toward that, it's going to be difficult to smoke. Maybe you want to play basketball full time. Smoking is going to make it hard to run up and down the court. Yeah. So if you're focused on running up and down the court, the smoking sort of fades away because it's not workable. It's not a workable behavior.
Yeah.
Right. But if all you're doing is focusing on smoking, it's going to be more difficult generally to accomplish that goal.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Yeah. It's funny you say that because I mean, it just made me think of some things essentially like, why are you trying to do? Well, like it goes back to so I'm going to be getting into the public speaking space soon. And for me, like it's going to be the main question I'm going to be asking people is what do you want and why? And so at the end of the day, a lot of people see whatever they're doing, right? Like what are they actually trying to accomplish and why is the reason that they're trying to accomplish it? And so it's funny because people are like, I want to quit smoking, right? But really, what is the goal that they're trying to accomplish by the quitting smoking? Are they escaping a problem? Are they trying to play a sport? Like what is the real goal here? And if you're clear on what you want and why you want it, it becomes a lot easier to just go ahead and do that. But a lot of times too, I think like I described before is I didn't know what I was escaping. I didn't know what my issues were. And I just knew that I was stressed and I had all these anxieties and I just hadn't taken the time to really delve through it. And so, I mean, for anyone's listening, like if you don't speak to it, I mean, like, I'm not saying you need to speak to a therapist on a regular, but you need to find someone that you can talk to about this stuff. You should seek out friends, seek out family. And if you don't have those, then the best bet would be to find somebody like a therapist that you can discuss about these problems. And from like books that I've read, like have you heard of Nicole LaPera? What is the name of the book? This is How We Do the Work or something like that.
I haven't heard of this.
Long story short is she talks about the wide range of traumas and like, you know, some people just had like parents that were like super anxious, right? And that anxiety got passed on to the kids. And so a lot of people don't feel that they had any trauma because they were like, well, I actually had a good life. You know, my mom was a bit stressed out, but I don't actually have anything that I need to discuss. But they don't understand that there's repercussions. Like, you know, maybe they're not able to relate to people because their mom was always scared and that got passed on to them. And so even though you might not think there's something to discuss, if you start pulling at the threads, there's probably something there that you can elaborate on or that you can work on and that you probably need to discuss.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people, if you were to say to someone, if there were no other problem, if we had a magic wand, it could wave away all of the issues in the world, would you be doing anything different? Is there anything that you'd be focusing on or trying to accomplish right now?
Yeah.
And some people would say like, well, yeah, I'd be an astronaut or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I would want to go into, so what's preventing you from doing that? There's something that you're in the way of yourself. And so generally a lot of people, it's a pretty sophisticated defense is that, no, I don't need to do that. I'm going to do this. Yeah. But if you really get down to the bottom of it, what your values are, there's always something there, I think, for most people, maybe all people, that they have a block. They feel stuck somewhere in their life. Yeah. And this is why, I mean, if I had to say, everyone would have a therapist. But at the same time, because it provides that space to go inward with someone else to help you find those little blocks, places where you're stuck, places where you can do something different. Even if everything's going really well, there's still things that you want to do more effectively. And I think that's what it's about, is being more effective at being the person that you want to be. Living in a values-oriented way. Right? That you're being guided by your compass that says, this is who ideal life Jared lives.
You're living in fullest alignment with the truest version of who you are and what you want and why. Right. And have you heard of somebody named Peter Crone? I saw him give a speech at one of the Aubrey Marcus summits that I went to recently, and he said a quote which defines exactly what you're trying to say, and I'll text this to you later. But the person that I am now for myself is the obstacle to the freedom I desire. So I'm going to repeat that again. The person I am now for myself is the obstacle to the freedom I desire. And he explained that this quote really encompasses like exactly what you said, that you are the biggest obstacle to achieving what you really want in life. And freedom I desire encompasses pretty much everything that the human experience wants. Do you want freedom from financial problems? Do you want freedom from emotional problems? Do you want freedom to just do what you want? But freedom really encompasses what you might be desiring in your life. And so the person you are at this exact moment is the thing you have to overcome to achieve what you really want in life.
Absolutely.
And it was just like this quote that it sounds like almost like a tongue twister, but when you understand and you dissect it and you're like, fuck, I'm really the problem here. I need to get past myself and exactly who I am at this moment for myself to get to where I need to go.
So that begs the question of, so what do you do if you know you're the obstacle?
Yeah.
How do you overcome that version of yourself?
So what he showed us and the way that he was doing it is he was doing these live, there was a room of like a couple hundred people, and somebody would ask a question or they would say an event that happened to them, maybe a childhood trauma, and he would show how they've created this narrative in their mind. So the example that I'll use is the person that he was doing on stage, and the person, what happened is they had developed a stutter. From when they were a child. And that stutter, essentially, it was like this protective device that they had created to protect themselves so that when they're stressed and they're under anxiety, they start stuttering. And so what he showed is because they have this stutter as like a fall safe, that they never really feel safe in their entire life. And because they don't feel safe, they act and they operate from a place of non-safety. And so it has this cascading effect on everything they do in their entire life because they never fully feel safe, because they never got over being that little kid that was beat by their dad or beat by their parent. And so because of that, it's instilled in their mind. And so they're literally living every single day in a state of fear and not feeling safe. And so what he showed is when he basically was able to explain to that person, this is what's happening. Once they understood what was happening, then he offered a reframe, and he basically showed them in every aspect of their life, are you not safe? And not only that, but not to be angry about this thing that they developed and that they believed was keeping them safe, because it's actually awesome. That stutter did save him. Right. It actually helped him get to where he is today. It was a great tool.
It was adaptive at one time.
It was adaptive over time. And so basically now it's like, okay, now you want to move on to the next stages. It's time to let that go. You have to reframe and understand that you are safe and you are the fullest expression. You don't need this anymore. And so, I mean, that's what was shown to me. Was that explained correctly?
Absolutely. Yeah. And,
okay, cool.
And because the question is, the field of psychotherapy, right? Is what does it take to do that?
Yeah.
So even if we broke that down further, how does someone let that go?
Yeah. I'm not sure about the exact details of it. I'm just trying to explain from what I saw.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Because
I'm just trying to dive down
a
little deeper because these are great ideas and concepts, and this is what pop psychology is generally, is that we learn these things and feel like if we just have some level of insight, everything's going to get better. Yeah. But really, it's changing and doing something new. So recognize that this is not effective right now. It takes a whole combination of skills. One is to be present moment. To be focused, to bring your attention intentionally to the present moment, to realize I am doing this, A, I feel this way, B, and I'm thinking this way, and is it effective or not? Is it workable? And these are all things, these are skills that you have to do. It's not being on automatic pilot. Yeah. It's really cultivating this skill set to be able to respond to a present moment that it's so easy to slip into because maybe you've been doing it for 30 years or so. Yeah. Right. So this is generally what psychotherapy is helping people to take these concepts and apply them to their life in the moment. Yeah. So not just in therapy, but if you're in therapy out there, or you've experienced probably, or you've done homework, right? You're applying it throughout the week. You're trying it. You're in behavioral or cognitive behavioral psychology, or third wave. Cognitive behavioral psychology was more mindfulness oriented. You're practicing these things. It's more behavioral experiments. You're trying things, seeing how it works. And and these skills, I would argue, is all around, and is from the ACT model, acceptance commitment therapy model, is that these skills are all about cognitive flexibility. you're saying it doesn't work anymore. So being flexible to change something,
Yeah.
right? It has to do with diffusing yourself from your thoughts after you brought your attention to the moment, diffusing yourself, and then ultimately moving toward your value. And it's no longer about fighting against this fear, but it's about, what do I want? I have to leave this stutter alone because I'm committed to being the person that I want to be.
Yeah. And so I guess it's like the word that comes to mind is like integration, right? It's like, now I understand this new belief. And so let's use me as an example. So maybe we can like do that. Okay.
Definitely.
So for me, I love my mom. We have a great relationship now. We're cool. My mom raised me the best way she could, but my mom was a bit physically abusive when I was a child. And so for that reason, I was scared of my mom and my dad in my entire youth, in the sense that I was terrified of making decisions on my own because I was always just worried about what they think, and I was so scared about what they think, I was terrified of making decisions. I went to a men's group. I processed that, and I now understand that my whole life, pretty much all the decisions I made up until probably like 34 years old, I would think about my parents and what they would think, and I wouldn't make decisions of what I really wanted. It was what they wanted. And so now I'm past that, right? And so
Are you?
well, not obviously not. Nothing is always fully past everything. It's always well, it could always be there, or it could be gone. The first step I took was booking that trip, traveling around the world, because the only reason I didn't do it sooner was because I was terrified of what my parents would think. And so when I worked past that, like that would be an example of like, I guess, would that be an example of me integrating it and just making decisions from a place of like, what do I want, and not thinking about what other people want? Like, would that, like, was I integrating it correctly?
It sounds like it. I mean, that correctly is right. It
depends.
Up to you.
Yeah. It depends. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like you sort of you made an intentional decision, not in that typical pattern of looking around for validation before you made a decision, that you did something without that. But you could probably, if you looked close enough, still see that automatic Joe that's a little afraid of what others think and making sure that you're living up to someone else's expectations. It doesn't mean it's a bad thing, right? It doesn't. That's actually, I think, a good point to make, is that even these things that we feel like are problematic, maybe that stutter, it's that, even though it's sort of maladaptive right now, it also is making you who you are today, right? And in some ways that can be very effective and helpful. Just like being an anxious person, maybe you're the person that people go to say like, did we get everything right? And you're like, nope, we didn't, because I can let my neuroses kind of let go, and it's actually free. Really helpful right now. Right? So looking for people's validation, it's probably a skill set in some contexts, right?
I mean, you're hitting it on the nose, right? I remember reading a book by Jim Quick. I don't know if you know who Jim Quick is. He's one of the top brain coaches in the world.
A lot of stuff I don't know.
Yeah, no worries. So Jim Quick his trauma was that essentially he had a brain injury at a very young age, and now he's one of the top brain coaches in the world because it motivated him. He's like, no, my brain, I can make it work, and basically he was able to do that. So for me, so sometimes your trauma becomes your superpower. Exactly what you're saying. For me, my mom had 14 pregnancies to have 3 children. She lost 9 kids. So she was very, very, very protective over me, especially because I was the first and I'm the oldest. So she lost 6 kids before me. So when I was a kid, I was not really allowed to hang out with other kids. It was because out of fear that I was going to get hurt, that something was going to go wrong. I wasn't even allowed to ride my bicycle in front of our house. Like, I was in the house and had to be under her watch at all times. And so because I wasn't allowed to have as many friends as a normal kid, and I was always wanting friends, now, I mean, you know me as an individual, like I'm the most hyper social person I know. I feel only comfortable, like not only comfortable, but I feel mostly comfortable when I'm with other people, having conversation, connecting with others, where I'm making friends, where like a lot of people say this saying where like, you should only have like a handful of friends. I'm like, I think everybody can be your friend. Like, and I think everybody should be your friend. There's always an opportunity for any new connection with any individual, but that's because of what I went through and because of, you know, the way that I was raised. And for me, it was painful and it sucked for a long time, but it ended up turning into one of my greatest superpowers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you have an example of that for something like yourself?
It's a great question. And I guess I'll just thinking about it a little bit, I think I came from as a child, I was really looking for validation, and maybe in a similar way that you described with, I thought I was sort of, I had parents that, they were critical. They really wanted the best for me.
Yeah.
And I think often that meant demanding things of me, or in a way that was saying, you're not doing it right. You're not doing it right. Look at you. You're not doing it right.
Mm.
And even though they said all the other great things too, like, you're doing so great,
Yeah.
I heard the you're not doing it right.
Yeah.
And so I think as I, became my autonomous growing adult, and that was part of that stage for me where I just rejected my parents and pushed them away.
Were you like did you have the type of parents where it's like if you got an A, you'd get in trouble if you didn't have an A plus?
Didn't get in trouble,
Okay.
but you can do better.
Got it. You can do better.
And it's almost in a supportive way, but right? It's just,
Yeah.
this is how, it depends on the lenses that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Because of the sequence of moments throughout my life, I see that as you didn't do well enough.
Yeah.
And so no criticism of my parents even, because I think we're all doing the best we can.
Yeah.
And shoot, I'm grateful because they raised a gentleman.
You're the worst. But you are
So
a gentleman.
I'm really happy just that everything happened the way it did. Right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't take any of it back.
Yeah.
I have great relationships with both my parents now. But I think in that place of, I grew up seeking validation from other people. I was very shy. I was a teacher's pet because I knew I could get the validation from the teacher because I knew how to do the assignments. A's, right?
Yeah.
Had straight A's throughout school. But I didn't really know how to get the validation from other kids. And as a teen, you have the popular crowd. I wasn't in the popular crowd until high school, and that was when something changed for me. It was like the moment I remember this girl that I had sort of always looked up to, like, oh, she's beautiful, she's so nice.
You look up to anyone?
I thought, I was still like 5'3". I grew like 7 inches in one summer, which is crazy.
Sick. Same.
Major growing pains. And magnets on my feet, man. My mom had to buy me like 3 different sets of jeans that year.
Oh my
we
God,
went broke.
That's wild.
Yeah. No, but there was a pivotal moment, and it's when I got the validation. She turned to me and was like, "When did you get so hot?"
Yeah.
And I was like, in that moment, like, everything was fine, and I was like, "Get out of here! Like, I don't care about you." And so I think that was actually a huge learning moment. Now that I can look back at that, hindsight's 2020, I was like, "Wow, how come I couldn't?" Because I didn't want to date her.
Yeah.
But for some reason, I was seeking validation from her. And if I could go back and give myself some guidance, it would be to, again, like, is this strategy workable? At one point, it was maybe helpful.
What strategy?
The strategy of seeking validation.
Yeah.
That you want to appease your parents. Your parents are taking care of you.
Yeah.
They're the ones that give you all that love and validation. And if someone is, like, I think at some points my parents were love withdrawing. Like, if you didn't do something right, I didn't get the love. So I'm seeking out the validation to get the love and the validation for more validation.
Yeah.
And if I could, really tell myself some words of wisdom, whisper in my ear, it would be like, you don't need other people's validation. You're worthy just as you are.
Yeah, but what I would say to that is, even if I went back and told little me that, I don't think you'd understand.
Yeah, and then you probably wouldn't be the person you are today, and I wouldn't either. So, like, it's not to change those things, but also this kind of to interrupt this intergenerational problem. I think in my family is like I'm wanting to take these lessons and display it to other people. Like, you are loved, you are worthy, no matter what. There's my expectation of you is coming from me. It's what do you want from yourself, and helping someone get that validation from themselves. Are you, check your own compass, man? Are you in line with your values? It may not be mine. And there's this idea that, like, well, if I'm a parent and as long as you're under my household, you're going to live this way. I'm not a parent yet. It's probably gonna be a tough one. Because I feel like, hey, if I'm gonna pay for your college, or maybe I don't. Hey, if you can do those things, but it's a tough conversation. We probably go on that one for a while. But to go back just to your question of, I think that sort of interpretation of judgment or criticism from my parents, who I cared about
Yeah.
their their understanding of me. I cared about their image of me so much that I was constantly needing validation, and that led to me seeking that from other people and not really being in line with myself. And it wasn't until like after college that I kind of had a click of, oh, I can do anything I want.
Yeah.
I don't have to just stand on this escalator of who I should be.
Yeah.
Like, this way, right? Okay.
Yeah.
This way, right?
Yeah.
Just stand here, okay? You know,
Yeah.
then it was, I don't know when it was a whole year. You know, a lot of things were happening in my life, and it was just a switch of, oh, I can literally do anything I want. I don't need validation from, even if my family's gonna love me. They might have a hard time if I told them I'm gonna do this or do that, but they'll get over it. And if they don't, it was a great relationship while it lasted.
Yeah.
And I'll have all these other great relationships too. So
Yeah.
it's okay. I don't need to hold on to those things that validate. I don't need their validation. I can still love them even if they're rejecting me.
Yeah, but it's like an understanding that also too, like everybody's on their healing journey at exactly the time they're supposed to be there, right? And sometimes people are not ready to heal too. And I know for me, like for example, I've tried having some of these conversations with people that are close to me, and some people are immediately open and receptive, and they want to talk about it, and they want to dive down, and through diving down through what I've gone through, it's helping them. But then immediately, some people immediately like rebuff me, or they reject what I'm saying, or they don't want anything to do with the words coming out of my mouth. And it's almost like a physical reaction to them, where they just don't even want to discuss it. They don't want to go down that road. And for me, I used to get angry, because I obviously feel a lot better as an individual now. I'm a lot calmer, and I just understand things, and like I just want to share that. And I used to get angry, and it's just understanding that people are coming to their conclusion on their own, and also just understanding that maybe the conversation that I had was just the nudge that will help open the door for them, and just understanding that everything's happening exactly the way it should, and they'll get to where they need to go immediately. But like if I was like talking to myself like 2 years ago, trying to explain all the shit that I went through in the last 2 years, if I didn't go through it, I wouldn't understand what the hell I was saying. And so like even when you were saying going back and telling yourself like you don't need that validation, you don't need that, like you got to go through it and figure out that you don't need it, and that whatever that journey looks like is whatever your journey looks like.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we develop and learn because of challenges.
Yeah.
I could probably say that, articulate that more, that
I
better.
think you did it in a very simple, good way. Yeah.
But just when we only learn new skills, I mean, if you even think at like a biological level, when you're exercising or training your heart, okay, cardio, training your heart.
Yeah.
It's like you have to run and push those boundaries and experience the discomfort, because those cells have to change. They have to adapt to the, to the extra mile that you're trying to run. And I think our personalities are the same way.
Yeah.
Our skill sets are the same way.
Yeah.
And we only learn these things because of hardship.
Yeah. I mean, I was praying recently, and when I was praying, I was like, well, why? I had a question, just basically asking like, why did I go through all this tough stuff that I've been through in my life, and everything that I'd been through, and why did this happen? And the reflection that I got back is like you said, like I'm this tough person that I feel is a rock, and like when people come to me and they share things with me, it doesn't shake me, it doesn't disrupt me to my core. And if I didn't go through the tough stuff that I went through, and I didn't go through the way that I was raised and all the stuff that I've been through, I would not be the person that I am today, that I can then help others. And so like, even when it's not a decision, right? Like the other flip side is like, how did that person, get so buff? It's like they put in the work. They had to go through the struggle. And like you said, how did they become a good runner? They had to practice every single day. And so it's like, sometimes you have to go through the shit to become the ideal person that you need to be for whatever your dharma or whatever you're supposed to play out in this life, and to help others and whatever you may be called to do. Yeah. Yeah. And even too, like, I know we had kind of talked like off script, like for me, like through my reflections, like you were talking about like, what do you really want? Right. And through like understanding, like, at the end of the day, like a lot of people, when you ask that question, like, what do you want, right? What do you really want? A lot of people will say, well, I want a boat. I want a yacht. I want $1 billion. I want $1 million. I want a car, whatever it is. But like, really, what do you really want? And through my reflections, like understanding that at the end of the day, like really what we're seeking, and you can tell me if you feel different, is we're really just seeking to feel, we just want to be happy and we just want to be loved. And that goes back to like what you said, like validation, like you just want to be loved, and that falls under the umbrella of love. And when it comes to being happy, like I want this car, I want a Ferrari because I think it's going to make me happy. I want the Ferrari because I think, it's going to get me the hot chick, which is going to, sleeping with the hot chick is going to make me happy. Or I want $1 billion because everyone's going to look at me and be like, oh, woo, he's got $1 billion. I can throw these sick parties and attract people like visually, but is that going to make me happy? So at the end of the day, I just think we're really all searching to be happy and to feel loved.
Yeah, feel loved and happy. They're definitely things that I think I want. And at the same time, I think this can be a trap because being a human being is not all, beautiful.
It's if it was beautiful,
Right.
It wouldn't be fun.
So it's
If it
this,
was all
it's this
beautiful.
idea where maybe we
Or maybe it would
we
be.
Yeah.
Who knows? I
don't
don't know
but
anybody
yeah,
that's had a fully beautiful
like, what
experience.
is it? You have to, the lily flower grows from the mud. This
Yeah.
idea that without pain and suffering, there is no happiness.
Yeah.
But I think we can fall into a trap if we're constantly seeking happiness. So not to say that that's what you're saying, but it just makes me think about this.
Why do you think that we're falling into a trap? Because I might disagree with that.
Yeah. So I think that if we are seeking happiness, then we might start rejecting the discomfort and the problems. We might start avoiding the pain in life at in this more hedonistic approach to an emotion of happiness. Happiness is an emotion. Well, running hills to build your strength so you can do a triathlon may not feel happy. Maybe you hate running, but you want to do the triathlon. Doing a triathlon would bring you some level of achievement, happiness, alignment with your values because you're accomplishing your goals, living your ideal life. Maybe you hate running hills. So you're going to experience anxiety about running hills. You're going to experience distress while running the hills. Maybe some sadness because of the injuries that you're going to experience.
Yeah.
Right. And seeking happiness, you might avoid that. Be like, no, I can actually be happy if I just do something else that's a little bit easier. You might start to avoid the things. You might start avoiding pain in seeking relief of pain.
I hear exactly what you're saying. Yeah, and what I would say is, I guess from me being a little bit further down my path, just understanding that if I'm really clear about what I want and I know why I want it, right? And if I'm living every day in full alignment and intention with like what I want, right? So like me understanding that if I want to be the best runner, that means every day I got to get up and run. And so I'm able then to frame in my mind that this is part of the process of me accomplishing what I really want. Right. And understanding too that sometimes that God uses me for the purpose of helping others on their journey, and that sometimes that might feel uncomfortable for me, but it might be what needs to be done. But that's also like coming from a full understanding that you kind of, for me, I believe that everything happens for a reason, and that reason is maybe not your reason. Maybe it's somebody else's intentions playing out. But the reasons are decisions that people make to try to accomplish what they really want out of life. And so when that energy is put out in the universe, it affects everything else. And so understanding that sometimes things are uncomfortable, but it's part of like somebody's decisions or your own decisions that you got exactly to where you are because of the decisions you made, that for me, it's a lot easier to accept. And yes, it's every moment is not going to be happy, but I still think that the goal is to always want to be happy, but understanding that process. Like, you ever seen that meme, which is like, people think the road to success is just this straight line. And really the road to success is this scribbly backwards line going like 40 miles the wrong way, going down, going up, and then you get to success because that's just how life is. Yeah. And so, yeah, I hear exactly what you're saying because I think some people can get trapped in that. But also if they understand that just all the shit is also part of the journey too, then it becomes so much easier just to accept that it's happening for a reason. Maybe you need to learn a lesson because the person that is that person needs to understand this, or maybe to run this business that you're trying to run and you're trying to understand how to manage all these employees. Maybe you need to get sued by an employee, and it needs to be a very difficult process to understand what it's like to run things with one employee. And sometimes for me, like I make mistakes on cases. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Like I manage myself 100 cases right now. I've made some mistakes, and I just thank God that the mistakes that I've made are all mistakes that I could afford. And sure, some of the mistakes I made have been $10,000 mistakes. Some have been $50,000 mistakes, but they were all exactly at the precise timing that I need, because maybe one day I don't have the capacity to handle a $1 million mistake. And so it's understanding that each of these lessons I'm learning is just part of the plan to build me up to become the person that I want to be, because it's what I asked for. Absolutely. And it's what I want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm thinking, if I could go back and maybe even reframe that when I was saying we can be trapped, it's actually
you can trap yourself.
Yeah. But you can be trapped by this seeking happiness. It's actually Russ Harris is an author and the psychologist. He's one of the proponents of acceptance and commitment therapy. He wrote a book called The Happiness Trap. So I'm, being sort of reminded of some of the things he says in that book, and things that are core to acceptance and commitment therapy, the process of therapy. But that when I say that trap is sometimes I think if we're not connected with our values, that's when it can be a trap, right? You're talking about maybe this full understanding that you mentioned.
Yeah.
Right? That's you knowing that this road to my value, it's not to happiness. The happiness is, I think, the thing that happens when you are connected and in alignment.
Yeah, you're right.
Sense of peace and happiness.
I'm not chasing happiness.
Right.
I'm chasing living in full accordance with my values, my beliefs, and who I am as a person.
And when you're doing that,
yeah,
you're happy.
Yes. Thank you for that clarification, because I was not clarified. It's like happiness comes as a result of you living in accordance with who you are and what you want. And that comes in accordance with knowing your values and what you believe in and what you're trying to accomplish.
Right. So if we went outside and saw a billboard of some people on some jet skis next to a yacht, and we're like, wow. And you can imagine yourself in that scene and you're like, man, I'm so happy. Then that trap could be, I need that to be happy.
Got it.
And that's, I think, where a lot of us get trapped, is that we're trying to do the things that we're being told, you're happy when you do this, right? Like, oh, I'm happy when I'm with my friends at a bar. Yeah. Is that really what makes you happy? You were happy, but that was maybe you were happy that one time because you were in alignment. You were having a great conversation that's in alignment with your values. Yeah. Happiness is something that occurs, I think, when you're in alignment. So I think we together we made a good point there.
No, that was good. That was a good full circle way of explaining it, because you're absolutely right. Because for me, I would say honestly, maybe even the last week, this has been the most happy I've been as a human being. And it was after reflecting in Joshua Tree and just having some time to think and just connect, and pray, and just basically realizing happiness is not something that you achieve. It's not a moment in time, but it's just literally, it's a way that you feel, and it's as a result of just living in full accordance. And for me, I've just become clear about the things I want and why I want them. And now it's what do I need to do to accomplish those things? And if I'm doing them at every moment of every day, I can have some fun along the way. I can, it's just understanding that if you're doing what feels right, I believe that if it always feels right, it probably is right. I mean, obviously there's extreme situations, if you have a very skewed way or you have a mind that's not logical, but if you're doing what feels right and it's in alignment with who you are as a person, then you're going to be a happy individual. And it's like what Gary Vee talks about too. It's not about the end destination of creating this $1 billion company. You got to learn to enjoy the journey every single day. If you don't love the journey, you're going to hate your entire life, because your entire life is a journey. It's not an end point. Yeah.
And again, the why you want the $1 billion company.
Yeah. Why?
Is it in alignment with your values, or is that because you think you'll be happy when you reach that point?
Yeah. I mean,
and that's the trap. And therein lies the trap, right? Is that it's about the journey, to focus on the journey, but then that's what it's all about. It's not about that destination. It's all about the journey. Yeah. I completely agree. How cool. One sec. I'm going to pull up my questions. I wrote a bunch of questions for you. All right. We have about 15 minutes left. Okay.
I'm going to ask you Do you mind if we go for like 20? Are you in a hurry?
I'm not in a rush.
Okay, cool. I want to ask you personal questions, the questions that I sent over.
Okay.
So, what is the craziest thing you ever heard happen in the military when somebody came to you and told you a story? Yeah.
It wouldn't be from a soldier. It was from a traveler that had evacuated Kabul, and they were traveling with their mother and a stepfather who was raping them, and she was, I think her father was killed, or killed by Al Qaeda because he helped the U.S. and wanted to, and they were all trying to get the U.S. She actually, with the help of me and another psychiatrist, decided in that moment that she wanted to travel by herself, that she actually had that right. And so we helped her split from her family in Germany and go her own way.
Wow.
So it was it's like a crazy thing. Just one of these, wow, I'm just popping into this person's life at this moment that's going to.
But you helped.
Yeah, I think so. I was there at the right moment to a point where she felt like she could express that and talk about it, and then in a position where something could be done about it.
Yeah, because I'm sure that there's a lot of times where you just feel maybe even like hopeless, and like there might not feel like something that you could do, but this was actually something that you could like legally do and like assist her in that road.
Yeah. Like you can jump on that plane if you want.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, and there it was.
So. When you say this, right, obviously, like for me, people come and complain about their problems. People come and complain to you about their problems. In my opinion, the problems that people are coming to you about, I mean, like I've heard the gambit of stuff, but you're obviously dealing with super heavy shit. Mm-hmm. How, as an individual, do you not want to kill yourself sometimes when you hear about all the fucked up shit that's going on in the world?
Oh, well.
And that might have been a bit dark.
Yeah. I mean,
but I meant just like what I'm asking is like, how do you properly take in that energy and not let it affect you?
Yeah, there's a healthy level of compartmentalization, right? As a therapist, you're often empathizing, which is different than sympathizing. If someone's down in a hole, you're climbing down in the hole with them to understand what it's like.
That's sympathizing?
That's empathizing.
That's empathy.
Sympathizing would be like, that must suck.
Got it.
Empathizing is like, oh yeah, that sucks.
So are you saying
it's
that
feeling it? Empathy is. We come with this idea that we have mirror neurons. If the roof fell right above you, I would do this too, because we're programmed to understand what your experience is like, and that's really diving into that experience of what your experience is like. So I'm really attempting to understand how you feel.
So you're trying to empathize. You're trying to go into
not feel bad for someone,
yeah,
but to feel what they're feeling.
So you're saying you're going into that hole with them, and you're trying to
climb
feel
down and be like, yeah, this does suck.
Got it.
Right. So to compartmentalize a little bit is. Like, this is where you're at. I just came down here to visit.
Got it.
And it's climbing back up to wherever, maybe climbing back into my own hole, right?
Yeah.
But going back to my life.
I'll hang out in your hole. That was
weird. Yeah. So I think, I have my own rhythm in my day, and part of that leaving work is to set all my patients' lives up on a shelf somewhere that I'm going to come back to. Yeah. If I find myself thinking about them after work, sometimes I give it some thought and understand, like, oh yeah, maybe it does apply, and then decide, do I want to think about this right now or put my energy into this? Because maybe I do. Maybe I actually want to figure this one out because I haven't been able to reach that some sort of understanding. And then other times it's like, no, I'm with my partner right now and I want to be eating dinner. So so that's one of these cognitive strategies we were talking about earlier. Like, how do you let something go? That's one of those bringing yourself present moment awareness and making a decision. I want to take myself out of this thinking process right now, just by saying those are thoughts I'm going to come back to. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's someone else's life. It's not mine.
It's
is the short question. Is the short answer to your question.
For me, compartmentalizing is the perfect word.
Yeah.
I was not good at that for a long time. I was going through my own chronic depression for pretty much most of my legal career until about a year ago, because I was like taking it all on as my own like personal problems.
And you've seen, people that have had the worst things in life happen to them.
You have paralyzation, you have death, you have dismemberment, you have all kinds of heavy stuff. And it's like, I need to go and advocate.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I needed to empathize because I need to understand their pain, and I need to properly advocate to get them monetary compensation for that pain.
And they're looking to you to sort of makes things right somehow.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure there. There's some responsibility that I'm sure you had to shake a little bit, which is you can only do the best you can.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, that's what it comes down to, right? Is just, are you doing the best you can? And understanding too, like, I mean, like, I have no problem also working with other lawyers because I understand that sometimes my best is not good enough.
Yeah, right.
But I think a lot of people with egos, especially lawyers that I know, they'll try to think that they can do everything. But I am very well aware of what my skill sets are and where my capabilities lay. And I have no problem asking for help when I need it. And that's been a huge asset to me as I've gotten older and more successful, just knowing what are my limitations and what do I need help with.
That is a great strength.
Yeah. And asking for it when you need it too. Yeah. Cool. Okay. Another question that I have for you is everybody has their worst client they've ever had.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you obviously don't tell me who your worst client is, but who is your worst client and what did they teach you? What did you learn from that experience? Yeah. There's always that person.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking even just two.
There's
two
sometimes there's a couple, yeah.
And both with some characterological problems.
Characterological
or personality disorders.
Got it. Like split personality disorder, or bipolar, or like what?
Borderline personality disorder is the
That's so funny that you mentioned that because my worst client has borderline personality
It's a difficult
disorder.
personality structure because you become the center of focus for them.
Yeah.
And it feels like you just got wrapped up in their life and you just, whoa, what just happened?
Yeah, you're their savior and their devil at the same time.
Yeah. And so I think what I learned, through that, I'll try to do the short answer first this time. Is that
no, you don't have to give me short answers. That's why we're on a podcast.
All
right, don't give me the short answers.
Yeah. No, trying to make a point and then talk about it though, is that I think I learned to be aware of myself in the room a little bit more. And that was in training too, the first one, and then the second one was after. But
you said be more aware of yourself?
Be aware of myself, yeah, because you can get wrapped up into other people's lives.
Yeah.
And cognitively too, you can find that you're thinking a certain way and like, this is not how I think, or this is not how I generally approach these issues. And
for sure,
now I feel like I need to take care of you, or that I'm responsible for this and I'm not. And why am I even arguing with myself about this? And so it's about being able to know who I am and to stay present within myself,
to separate
whatever
yourself.
myself is. Not sure if I totally understand yet.
Yeah, but you have a general idea, which is what we discussed. You understand what your values are, what you believe in, and that is a way of self-discovery, right? And understanding what you stand for and what you're about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I guess that's really good advice in the sense that you are not this person, you are not their problems, and even though you're trying to help, you are a separate entity, and you need to keep that separation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in knowing who myself is was that's what kind of propelled me into focusing more on mindfulness in my training. I started leading mindfulness-based stress reduction treatments, so it's just focused on mindfulness meditation, and started bringing a lot more present moment awareness to my life, and more focusing like I'm having these thoughts and I'm having these sensations and these feelings, and being able to, that is just such a skill that I've been using, and I'm not practicing formally very much right now.
Yeah.
But I find myself informally, like I'm in an elevator, and I'll just say like, oh, what are the sensations I'm having in my fingertips? Oh, I'm noticing I'm having these thoughts. Right, just attuning to your experience.
Yeah. Did you read The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle?
Some of it. I haven't finished. It's on my shelf.
That's funny you say the same thing. I'm like mostly through it, but I didn't get all the way through it. But
I felt like a little repetitive. I've read the same thing
exactly
over and over
what you're
again.
saying though is like the sensation of fingertips, taking just a breath, and like I did that a lot when I was in Italy when I would get like super anxiety over like nothing. I'm like, all right, just take a deep breath. Yeah. You are walking in Florence. It's beautiful. Yeah. There's cobblestone steps. You can smell pizza in the air. Just come back to this present moment. What are you experiencing? And everything is safe. Everything is perfect. There is no future. There is no past. We're just now.
Yep.
And it was this weird thing where like I think some people would just like see me suddenly stop out of nowhere, but when you're walking by yourself, you can just suddenly stop
Yep.
out of nowhere. So it was, yeah. So I hear you. Sorry, segue.
Yeah, no, that's what I think I learned from my patients in some way or another, right?
Yeah.
Is how important that was for me. Sometimes,
Yeah.
and now recognizing in my personal life, like you asked us, oh man, I need to learn this for my trade, and then realizing, no, this is a practice I need to use for my relationships, and just to be connected with my values. And we recognize, oh, I'm having this urge to go do this thing that's actually not helpful and workable. It's actually not good for me.
Yeah.
Let it go.
Yeah.
It's just an urge. Let that wave pass through me and come out on the other side of that wave and say, now I want to do this. Now that I've refocused my attention. So it's, big lessons from patients.
Yeah. I mean, too, like there was one that you said like about like feeling that wave, right? So I heard a speaker at one of the Sacred Sons events that I went to where he was talking about emotions in general. So emotions, there's no good or bad emotions. There's just emotions. And emotions, it's nothing wrong with them. You should actually feel that wave and whatever it's signaling to you. And typically, an emotion can just be felt, and it's good to just feel it for the sake of feeling it. But if something feels wrong, that emotion is simply signaling to you that something is out of misalignment in your life, and you need to do something to get back in alignment so you're not feeling this emotion anymore. But once again, it's just it's impartial almost in a sense when it's just the truest expression of how you feel, and you should feel it and you should see that. And I think when people try to categorize emotions as bad, like sadness, there's nothing wrong with being sad. You know, sometimes you need to feel sad. Even anger, sometimes anger just is an emotion, it needs to well through you, but just pay attention to what it is and let it come through and don't push it away.
I think we've, it's sometimes easy to say like who wants to feel shame or jealousy?
Yeah.
It's painful to experience those things, and yet they're a part of life. They're a part of being a human being.
They're part of the journey.
But I think we often think that we don't, though they're bad emotions, because if we just let ourselves be on an automatic pilot, what does shame make us want to do? Like hole up and be a less version of ourselves, like a lesser version of ourselves almost. It doesn't feel good to do that automatic behavior. Yeah. So this emotion-driven behavior, this is kind of when you're talking about the function of emotions, that they're telling us that there's something wrong. They also immediately tell us what to do. If we just turn our prefrontal cortex off and just let ourselves be guided by our emotions, be an alligator. Yeah. Right? I was just thinking about that from Waterboy.
Yeah, I was saying the same thing. Medulla oblongata.
Yeah. But if you just let your emotions charge you, you're not gonna, as a human being, you're gonna be deeply dissatisfied with your life. Yeah. Because you're gonna be avoiding everything that's distressing. Right? You're not gonna run those hills to compete in that triathlon. Yeah. You're gonna continue getting everyone's validation. Yeah. And you're not gonna go on that trip because you're just gonna do what the emotion tells you to do, which is to avoid distress. Yeah. Yeah. And I've also just shout out to Kevin Walton. That's who the speaker was at the Sacred Sons event. Just if anybody wants to look him up, he's super cool, dude. Source Radiance on Instagram. All right. So another question I have for you is, I'm going to ask you the question that you taught me. What do you want your tombstone to say about you? Yeah. Yeah. I think simple, sweet, life well lived. That's it. If we were at my funeral and someone was reading something more about me, I think that would be the theme, is that there were a lot of things in life, and he explored a lot of them. Yeah, I can attest to that. He experienced and took life by the bull by the horns a bit, and kind of rode into the storm just to see what it was like. Yeah. Left a positive impact. Yeah. Helped people along the way. Yeah. Became a better version of himself, which is, has this butterfly effect in the world, hopefully. Yeah. What would it say today if you died today? That
I'm pretty sure it would say
Pretty close.
I'm pretty sure it would say whatever, dude, at the bottom.
Whatever. Yeah. I mean, I am of course not in complete alignment, right? And always.
Yeah, we're always growing.
Yeah.
Always
But
changing.
yeah, I mean, if I keeled over right now, I think I'm like what I'm doing right now and having this conversation with you is all about, the kind of person I want to be. So
Yeah.
I'm living in accordance with my values today so far.
Good. Awesome. I love to hear that. Yeah. I want to ask you what is the weirdest thing you'd ever done, but I don't think we can talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
So we'll move on to the next question. You got to come hang out with us if you want those answers.
Yeah, right.
All right. Just being in your space for people that are, I mean, obviously everyone's going through like mental health issues. What is just like one good piece of advice that you could think that you could give to people that could maybe even help them start on the journey to figuring themselves out or self-discovery? Like, what is one piece of advice you think you could give people?
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's a two-piece, actually. Take moments each day to come into contact with the present moment. And that takes some skill to do. And so some training might be involved in mindfulness, meditation. But you don't necessarily need that, right? It's as simple as just attuning your attention intentionally to something that you want to pay attention to, right? Whether it's your breath, like in meditation, or just focusing and choosing to focus and keep your focus on something. That's training your mind in attentional control. The second piece is why I do that. And I think that's so you can check yourself.
Before you wreck yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So that way you can look at yourself and make and create little moments in your automatic pilot throughout the day to actually regain control of your ship, right? Because that's where change happens, I think. And you have to actually come out of your automatic pilot to recognize like, oh, I'm doing this right now. I can do something different right now. Yeah. And make that decision in the present moment. It's so easy to say like, oh yeah, I need to do this. I should do this. No, do it right now. And in the moment, shift those things. That's when you're going to find yourself more in alignment with your values, when you're going to be happier with the version of yourself that you are.
Yeah. I was hearing everything you're saying. I was looking up a quote because you reminded me of something. So a lot of people, I want you all to, obviously, you're going to have to come to this conclusion on your own, but you're all driving your own ship. No one else is driving your ship. You are driving your ship. And the thing that came to mind for me is this quote that Dr. Kelly Brogan said, which is, "It is important to remember you are the savior you are waiting for. No one is coming. Mommy and daddy will not save you." And it's just this basic understanding that stop looking to others to get the answers and solutions you need. Everything you need is within yourself. If you take some time to sit, listen, pray, reflect, and just hear what your body and your mind is saying, all the answers are there, and you can save yourself. You don't need to wait for anybody, and you shouldn't wait for anyone. Mm-hmm. It's up to you to accomplish your goals. Yeah. And I would end the podcast on that note, but I want to ask you one more question. Who's your favorite superhero and why?
Oh man. I haven't watched a lot of the Marvel and DC movies, but I think
it's not Genghis
as a it's whatever, dude.
It's whatever, dude.
No, as a kid, I think I just really liked Batman because he was cool as heck. He's in the darkness and he's just got all these sweet gadgets. And he's rich, but he's also really cares about some balance and justice in the world.
Like George Clooney Batman, not Robert Pattinson Batman.
Yeah. Maybe Val Kilmer.
For sure, Val Kilmer. For sure, Val Kilmer. That was a cool Batman.
It was, yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah, I think that would be it.
That'd be it. Cool. All right. So we can wrap up there.
Cool.
Unless you have anything else you want to share, any thoughts you want to share with me, are we good?
We're going to continue to share thoughts.
Yeah,
man.
We're going to for sure share a lot of thoughts moving forward. All right. So
thanks for having me here and having
typically,
this conversation.
Yeah, I would say typically we'd end with asking you who you can connect me to for the next podcast, but you're going to do that off because you're still thinking about it. And otherwise, I would tell people to give your contact information so people could reach out to you, but you don't run a business like that. But do you want to make yourself available for people to have conversations? Is that something you're interested in, or is there something you want to ask the audience for?
I would be open to that. I mean, if anyone, had a question specifically, and, I can give my email.
Yeah, give me your email.
So it's jared.c.frazier@gmail.com. So jared.c.frazier. I know I can't be your therapist just to answer that question because I'm, in the VA and doing that, but could certainly have a conversation. I like talking about a lot of things that we were talking about today, and make space for that in my life on the daily. So if you're curious about something, or maybe you have a point or a disagreement about something I said today, like I welcome it, let's chat. So
Yeah, awesome. And it's awesome that you're open to having conversation, but that's what life is about. It's about discussing and coming to conclusions on our own. So thank you so much for everybody chiming in today. Jared, I love you. I appreciate you being here. And yeah, I hope this brings a lot of value to your lives and that it helps you to live in full alignment with who you are as an individual. God bless. Have a good day. Peace out, Girl Scout. Let's roll.